There have been a lot of shakeups in the NFL this offseason, but none as big as Russell Wilson getting traded to the Broncos from the Seahawks. Russ has been one of the best quarterbacks in the league for a decade, and while Seattle has struggled in recent years, Russ is back in position to compete for a Super Bowl in Denver. In March, the Seahawks traded Russell Wilson and a 4th rounder to the Broncos for 2 first-round picks, 2 seconds, a 5th, Drew Lock, Noah Fant, and Shelby Harris, a massive blockbuster trade. The trade wasn't a contract issue, just it was more time for a change. So Russ does still have the same contract. Back in 2019, he signed a 4-year, $140 million extension, which at the time made him the highest paid player in the league, a designation he certainly deserved. You don't need to look far into Russell Wilson's career to see that he's an absolute stud. He is one of the best players in the league and has been since he stepped foot on the field for the Seahawks in 2012 as a rookie after they drafted him in the 3rd round. He has been an All-Pro, made the Pro Bowl 9 times, led the NFL in both passer rating and touchdowns, and more importantly, led the Seahawks to 2 Super Bowls. One was a victory over the Broncos of all teams, and he was a Malcolm Butler interception away from a 2nd ring. In 10 years in Seattle, Wilson threw for over 37,000 yards, 292 touchdowns, to only 87 interceptions, and went 104, 53, and 1, plus 9 and 7 in the postseason. There are so many reasons to be excited for Russell Wilson going to Denver. It's no secret that Seattle hasn't exactly been a great team for the last few years. Yeah, they didn't exactly have the money because they were paying Russ so much, but still. See, the Broncos have a really good roster, and I would argue that even in 2021, they were a really good team outside of the quarterback position. And I'll tell you what, it has been a ride in Denver since Peyton Manning retired. Trevor Siemian sucked. Paxton Lynch was a complete bust. There was the underwhelming return of Brock Osweiler, Case Keenum in 2018, and then in 2019, Drew Lock took over, but Joe Flacco and Brandon Allen played 11 of their 16 games. In 2020, Lock started 13 games, but Jeff Driscoll and Brett Rypien both got starts. And oh yeah, there was that one time where the Broncos played without a quarterback because of COVID. Last season, Lock started 3 games, but Teddy Bridgewater, who Denver traded for in the offseason, was the man behind center. The Broncos have certainly had their issues trying to draft quarterbacks, but Denver has brought in a veteran quarterback before Peyton Manning. He was a free agent ahead of the 2012 NFL season, and the Broncos signed him, and clearly it worked out well. Manning did only play 4 years in Denver, but it was a good 4 years. In his 2nd season, Manning won MVP and broke the NFL records for passing yards and touchdowns. Then in 2015, what was his final year in the pros, the Broncos won the Super Bowl. Plus, the same season Manning did win MVP, Denver made it to the Super Bowl, but got absolutely blasted into the sun and lost by 35 to, Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. Russ did have some good receiving weapons in Seattle. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, just 2 absolute studs. And I'll be honest, I do think the true receiver core in Denver is worse. I do love Courtland Sutton, though. He got a 4-year, $60.8 million extension this offseason, and it was well-deserved. Last season, he had nearly 800 yards, plus 2 touchdowns, but more than anything, it was a good bounce-back year, because in 2020, he played in a single game before he tore his ACL. Not the year he was hoping for after he had broken out in 2019, when he had over 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns. I mean, Sutton even made the Pro Bowl, and that was only his 2nd season in the pros, too. He had over 700 yards and 4 touchdowns as a rookie, a pretty decent showing for a guy the Broncos took in the 2nd round in 2018. I think if the Russ trade really helps any one specific person, it's Jerry Jeudy. I mean, dude, if you watch Jeudy back when he was at Bama, holy hell, this guy was unstoppable. There's a reason Denver took him 15th overall in 2020, and honestly, I'm surprised he didn't go higher. Statistically, he did have a solid rookie campaign, 856 yards, 3 touchdowns, but there was one really big issue, his drops. Not only did Jeudy have 12 drops, but he only had a 44% catch rate, one of the worst in the league. Not exactly ideal. Then last season, he missed a lot of time early in the year after he suffered a high ankle sprain in week 1. In 10 games, Jeudy had 467 yards, and he never even found the end zone. Jeudy still has a lot to prove, but at least it'll be easier to do with Russell Wilson. Now, the difference for Russ from Seattle to Denver is that he does truly have 3 capable receivers now, including Tim Patrick. He's not exactly a sexy name, his name is Tim, but damn, he's been mad good for an undrafted guy. After Patrick didn't hear his name called in 2017, he had 2 quick stints with the Ravens and the 49ers, but the Broncos signed him to their practice squad, and then he played in every single game in 2018. In 2020, he broke out with over 700 yards and 6 touchdowns, and again, last year, he had over 700 yards. This offseason, Denver gave him a 3-year, $34.5 million deal, and I'm telling you right now, there's no way the Broncos would give a guy over $11 million per season to just not use him. Chris Carson and Rashad Penny were certainly no slouches in the backfield for Russ in Seattle, but the Broncos do have a 2-headed monster of their own, starting with Javonte Williams. The Broncos drafted Javonte in the 2nd round 1 season ago, and he was really impressive as a rookie. He had over 900 yards and 4 touchdowns, plus over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in the passing game. Javonte isn't the only stud back there, though. So is Melvin Gordon. The once star back for the Chargers and 2-time Pro Bowler has over 6,100 rushing yards and over 2,200 receiving yards and 67 touchdowns in his career. Gordon has over 900 yards on the ground in each of his seasons in Denver, and there's no doubt that he'll get it done again in 2022. And it's a lot easier to do with a good offensive line, and that's going to be likely the biggest difference for Russ this season. Now, don't get me wrong, the Broncos are nothing special on the line, but compared to the Seahawks, which is just utter shit, they look like a bunch of all-pros. Seattle's line was straight up ass, and it's still going to be really, really bad this year, so honestly, good for Russ for getting out of there. But don't get me wrong, there are still plenty of questions surrounding the Broncos, and it is possible that Denver starts off slow trying to figure things out. Not only do the Broncos have a new quarterback, but also a new coach, Nathaniel Hackett. For the last 3 seasons, Hackett has been the offensive coordinator for the Packers, while Green Bay had a ridiculously good offense and Aaron Rodgers took home back-to-back MVPs. Hackett's been around for a minute. He was once the OC for the Bills and later the Jaguars, but now it's time to see what he's capable of as a head coach, and it's going to be easier doing it with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Unfortunately, it's going to be really, really hard to do in the AFC West. The AFC West is an absolute gauntlet. You can literally make the argument for any of the 4 teams to either A, win the division, or B, finish dead last. The Chiefs have been a powerhouse for years now with Patrick Mahomes, and they were a few plays away from the Super Bowl last season. They're still there, and they aren't going anywhere, even if Tyreek Hill is gone. And of course, the other 2 teams in the AFC West have loaded up this offseason. The Raiders, who already have Derek Carr, traded for Davante Adams. It's an absolutely ridiculous division now. I mean, come on, you can literally argue that Derek Carr is a top 10 quarterback in the entire league, and he's easily the worst in his division. That's how wild the AFC West is. Not to mention, it feels like the Chargers went out and signed every single good free agent out there, bringing in Khalil Mack and J.C. Jackson, plus re-signing Mike Williams. And oh yeah, they still have that guy, Justin Herbert, behind center. The AFC West is going to be insane. But at the end of the day, Russell Wilson is Russell Wilson. And he'll find a way. He always does. Just let Russ cook.
Broncos country. Let's ride.